Welcome back, everybody, to Warchant TV. Alongside the managing editor of Warchant.com, he's Ira Schoffel. My name is Tom Lang. I'm the director of original content right here at Warchant.com and, of course, on Warchant TV. Before we get going with today's topic, please, the graphic is up right now. Hit the thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button, and the bell. If you haven't done these things yet, please do so now. The reason they're important to us at Warchant TV, every time you take one of these steps, we find more Knowles who are looking for awesome FSU coverage, and they haven't heard about us yet. If you can believe that, some people haven't. This is a way for them to find us right here on Warchant TV and Warchant.com. Ira, today's topic, it's the freshmen. Mike Norvell made some comments Friday afternoon after practice about how many freshmen might be contributing to Florida State's rotation this year, be it in the two phases of the game on offense or defense, certainly also in special teams, and it caught our eye and our ear. So you penned a piece right now on warchant.com, putting out all 17 signees from this year's recruiting class, the 2021 recruiting class, and you put them in tiers, correct, of who might be among the handful plus that contribute in a big way this year on down the line. What did you find as you put together this list from a general standpoint?
It's an impressive class. I mean, there's no question. The reason, I asked him about it on Friday at practice was because I really think after watching 2 weeks of preseason camp, that this is an impressive freshman class. I think they've done a good job. If you're a Florida State fan, looking for signs that this coaching staff is the right coaching staff and the future is going to be bright, the fact that they've hit on a lot of these kids. I mean, if you look at the freshman class that they brought in, there were 17 signees, only 16 are actually here. Destin Hill, the wide receiver out of Louisiana, did not enroll in time for the fall. They expect him to be here in January. But the other 16 guys, I mean, there's a lot of football players in there. There's a lot of guys that look like they can not only play the game at a high level, but some of them can even contribute this year. I was glad to hear Coach Norvell say that he thinks, I don't know, I can't remember if he said 5 or 6, around that number of guys who can make an impact this first year, because that's around the same number I had in my list, and the people can read at warchant.com. I have a couple other guys I think that have potential to make an impact this year as well. So probably 8 or 9 total that I think have the ability to and are ready to. The question with some of them is whether or not they're going to have the opportunity. Sometimes it's a position thing. Sometimes it's depth at your position. But I really feel like of the 16, 17 guys that they signed, about half of that group are guys that look like college football players already.
And we've alluded to it a couple of times, Mike Norvell's comments Friday after practice. Let's hear what he had to say right now, answering questions from our own Ira Schoffel.
I mean, I think it's a really good group. I mean, it is for the ability that these guys have. I mean, there's going to be a good number. I'd probably say 5 or 6 that are going to have an opportunity to impact this team this year. And then even the guys that don't, I mean, as they continue to grow and develop, I mean, it's a really good group, hard-working group. Obviously, as we get closer to the game, game 1, we'll see where that's at. The new rule that happened a couple years ago with those guys being allowed to play in 4 games, that gives us a lot of flexibility as the season progresses, and so we'll see how that all plays out. But no doubt, I mean, I think we hit with this freshman group, and they are responding in the moment.
All right, Ira, there it is. His eyes light up, too, when you asked Coach Norvell about, did you get good players? Basically, you asked him, do you like these guys? And he couldn't help but nod right away. Let's talk about a couple of those guys who will be contributing. We think, based upon our observations, Malik Mclean is one of those guys who, if you look at the 2 deep, right, there are opportunities to be had at wide receiver. That was true in the spring when he got here as an early enrollee. It's still true here in the fall, even with the arrival of Andrew Parchment. But speaking generally, what are some of the things you've seen out of Malik in camp as we've got through the first couple of weeks?
Well, it's really just a continuation of what we saw in the spring. I mean, he was a guy that is an early enrollee, really impressed right off the bat. You look at his frame, his size, and athletic ability. I don't know that I expected him to be able to run the way he runs at that size, but he's legit. I mean, he's a legit deep threat. He's also shown he's not afraid to make catches over the middle. He had a nice catch in the spring game, contested play. I mean, he looks like a guy that could be an all-around wide receiver. And if you look at Florida State's wide receiver core, especially this year and, probably off and on for the last few years, they've had a lot of smaller wide receivers. I think back to the year when it was Bobo Wilson and a lot of Kermit Whitfield and a lot of 5'10", 5'11" wide receivers. He's a guy that's 6'4", and right now on this team Ontario Wilson's not a huge guy. Keyshawn Helton's obviously not a big guy. So you got a guy like Malik Mclean who's 6'4", can really run, has a good body, good frame, and can catch the football. He's not the most consistent catching the football, He's been working on that. He's been getting better. But yeah, man, I just think he really gives you something that you don't necessarily have. So like, to your point, when you talk about the two deep and a guy that's going to be in the rotation, looks like he would fill a need that they don't really have a lot of other guys that can fill, at least physically.
Yeah, he's my favorite on the list, Ira, because of the opportunity that he's going to have. And so obviously the snap count, I think, is going to be pretty high for that particular position on offense. But Malik is somebody who looks sturdy for his size as well.
Right.
At 6'4", he's not a lanky player. It looks like he's got some body depth and density to be tough over the middle of the field, because obviously if you have a burner over the top like an Andrew Parchment, or you have, I don't want to call him a scat wide receiver, but a traditional looking slot receiver in a Keyshawn Helton or Pokey Wilson, you got to have somebody who can be the possession receiver as they project into their sophomore and junior years. And Malik Mclean is certainly one of those. He looks fairly sharp in his routes as well for being just a freshman. Reliability as a freshman receiver is a huge part of the equation. Can you block at your position if they've got perimeter looks? Certainly, do you break off on your routes in the right depths? It looks like he's executing those things early on, and the opportunity is there. So you can definitely see him being one of those 5 or 6 players. Another player who potentially could climb up the ranks into the 2 deep because, again, of a lack of depth of the position would be Patrick Payton. This is somebody that John Papuchis talked about briefly after the scrimmage through week 1 of camp, saying that he was having a great camp, is having a great camp. And Patrick Payton is, again, a body type and a skill set that Florida State just doesn't have a lot of, Ira.
Yeah, and he's a big 6'5", rangy pass rusher. Really the first day or two of preseason camp, I remember going out there and saying, well, who is that? And, when he signed, he was very undersized. He was like 6, I think they had him listed by Rivals at like 6'5", maybe 205, 210, somewhere in there. But he's put on some weight. He came in the summer. He's put on about 15, 20 pounds. Is filling out a little bit, but you could see the frame that he's going to have in a year or two. But, I really think there's a chance he could play early because they don't have a lot of explosive edge rushers. And so he's a guy maybe in situational passing downs, things like that. You could see a scenario where he gets out there. As you said, he's kind of been in and out a little bit this preseason, but I don't, from everything we can gather, he looks like he's going to be full go, barring any setbacks for when the season comes around. And I think he's a guy that definitely is going to be able to contribute, even if it's just situationally and on special teams. But man, if he comes off, comes in on some third down packages and gets 4 or 5 sacks as a freshman, that really would portend good things for down the future.
Well, and this is something that Nole fans have been stressing over since the departure of DeMarcus Walker, it seems. Ira, is like the reliability of players that can get you off the field on third down. And if your first wave of production comes from transfers and Jermaine Johnson and Keir Thomas, and then the next wave is a Marcus Cushney, who's another transfer, and maybe Patrick Payton, especially by midseason, if he grows into and gets used to the speed of the game, grows into the body that he's building through body by storms, as Devontae Love Taylor said on Trench Talk, then you might have multiple options that can help get you off the field. Isn't that something that would be a sight for sore eyes for Nole fans?
To follow up on that, I'm sure, the Derek McClendons and Josh Griffiths and some of those guys are more apt right now, more capable right now of being the backups down to down, to take a full series.
Right.
But I think, Payton might be a guy who slips in there for some situational series and then maybe down the road. But if you look at that defensive end room, Jermaine Johnson's going to be, he's a 1-year guy. Keir Thomas is a 1-year guy. Cushney might have a little bit more time, or he might be a 1-year guy. But you're going to have a lot of, when you look towards the future, they signed a couple other young pass rushers as well, George Wilson. But of that group, I think Patrick Payton is a guy that looks like right now you could see a scenario where, man, he could be a dominant kind of player in a couple of years.
There's a position group that's a real mess to sort out. We like it in terms of the overall talent it brings to the table, but if you're talking about the defensive backfield, Ira, I mean, it's anybody's guess as to how many packages that they have, what the 2 deep is going to look like, because guys have been moving around. I think we can say that speaking generally, but a couple of freshmen that have been making headway, not just in the spring, but also in fall camp, include Kevin Knowles and Shaheen Brown. Both have garnered a lot of praise over the course of the last few months and of course, the last few days. Where would you like to start with those two guys? Because they should be contributing as well already this fall.
Yeah, it's funny when you were just talking about that competition in the secondary. I just had this vision of like some of those years in Kentucky Derby when they've got like 18, 20 horses and they're all going down the track at the same time. And it's like, where do how's that going to get sorted out? Because they do have so many guys. You have a lot of guys that are returning players, returning starters, returning players in that secondary. You brought in several transfers who are going to be added to that mix. And then you have some talented freshmen along the, we mentioned Kevin Knowles and Shaheen Brown. Hunter Washington's also in this list, but we're not going to talk about him as much right now. But Kevin Knowles was a guy in the spring that, just like Malik Mclean, just like Josh Farmer, really was impressive in the spring. And you could tell right away, this is a guy that should still be in high school, but looks like he could play with college football players. They had him mostly at nickelback in the spring. They only let him work there to kind of focus on that position. In this preseason camp, they've let him play cornerback, and man, he is impressive. He makes a lot of plays, not just on the football. He had a really acrobatic leaping interception, the one-handed interception the other day in practice. But he also, the one play before that, he came up and lit up a tight end in Thud. He's a really impressive football player from Hollywood MacArthur High School, where Bryant McFadden went. Really talented player, very kind of brings a professional approach, no nonsense, doesn't talk a lot, just gets his job done. There's a lot to love about him. And then Shaheen Brown was probably the biggest, to me, he's the biggest surprise of the preseason. He's a guy that was not highly touted. He did not get the benefit of spring practice. So he kind of came in, a lot of us, to sight unseen in preseason camp, and all he does is make plays. The problem is he plays safety. And of those two positions, I think corner, Kevin Knowles might have a quicker path to get on the field at corner because there's still a lot. They have a lot of guys at corner, but not as many sure things. They have a lot of guys that played a lot of football at safety. I don't know how much Shaheen can get on the field at safety, but I think he'll be on the field a ton in special teams. And I think he'll, they're going to find ways to get him, both of those guys on the field, because they make plays at a really high clip.
Yeah, when we were out of practice on Friday, Ira, it was our own Austin Cox that we were talking to, said, if you just look at the recruiting class from 21, Shaheen Brown might be like in the throw-in category. Right. And yet when it bears out in camp and you get to the work day by day, he's the number that you see. I mean, I've been through a lot of camps. It's nice to have media access back, but there are certain players and certain numbers that you don't have to check the roster after about a day or two because you've already looked up their name 3 or 4 times because they stand out so much. And Shaheen Brown is one of those who just always seems to be around the football. And Kevin Knowles is, the name's already perfect, but the style of play is, again, if you're talking about getting off the field on third down and defensive ends being a sight for sore eyes for Nole fans, how about physicality in the secondary? How about somebody who can get downhill, make a play, tackle in space? Lamarcus Joyner is one of the great examples in Florida State history, certainly in recent history, where in the open field, you were going down. The form, the fundamentals of how to get somebody onto the ground and do so with a little bit extra was something that Nole fans enjoyed to watch the entirety of Lamarcus Joyner's career. Kevin Knowles, I don't want to compare him and put him on the pedestal of somebody like Lamarcus Joyner, who helped change the program way back when it went from Coach Bowden to Coach Fisher. But he has that aura about him that he might be really special in a couple of years, Ira. So while there is a lot of congestion at safety and corner, I think Kevin might be one of those guys that we could watch early on who could be somebody who makes the splash plays. It just kind of comes naturally to him, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. And we saw it in the spring. We saw it in the spring game, and then we've seen it in preseason. And I think that is a good comparison with Lamarcus Joyner because remember, I think Lamarcus early on, they played him a corner to get him on the field, but then later on he turned into that safety and just became a ball hawk and really a dynamic player, and not overly impressive physically in terms of his stature, but man, just made plays, was fearless and had great instincts. The thing about Shaheen, though, that I really love so much, and similar to Patrick Payton and similar to Josh Farmer and similar to some of these other guys in this class, is you look at the frame and you say, man, he's going to get bigger. Sometimes when a guy comes in is a 5-star recruit, sometimes they're polished. They are what they are. They're as big, as physically, as imposing when they come in as a freshman as they're probably ever going to be. But some of these guys, and Shaheen's one of them, man, he's going to get bigger and stronger and probably faster as his career, and he's already impressive. So again, man, just he's got legs for days, great reach, great, very rangy kind of kid. And I'm real excited about this freshman class. And like I said, we're not even talking about Hunter Washington, who has been impressive, and Josh Farmer, who's been impressive, and Jackson West at tight end. And there's a long list of guys that I even really like the young offensive lineman, but I just don't know. That's a position that's really tough to play as a freshman. But I really think we're going to look back and be impressed by this 2021 signing class.
Well, again, if Mike Norvell's poker face, which was awful, is any indication about the type of player that Florida State brought in, this could be that kind of transitional group where you look back at it the same way that the 2010 recruiting class was for Jimbo Fisher. Now, Ira, of course, we got the scrimmage on deck. The end of camp has been signaled in a sense. It was a long week for these players. They practiced every day straight through the week. They had pads on Friday. And then again, of course, Sunday night is scrimmage number 2, in which Coach Norvell said that they're going to mimic as much as they possibly can as a game-like situation. But what can we expect from us at Warchant.com over the next couple of days as we transition from the dog days of fall camp into really what amounts to preseason preparation and kind of a game week preparation leading into Notre Dame on Sunday, September the 5th?
Yeah, and before this got posted just recently, Austin Cox, who you mentioned earlier, wrote a story kind of looking at 3 big position battles going into the scrimmage tonight. So that's still up on the website. You can find that as well, where he kind of breaks down 3 big there's a lot of positions that are up for grabs, but he kind of focused on 3 of them. So you can read that. Coming out of the scrimmage, obviously, we'll have a lot of coverage on the website tonight and then into tomorrow. But then also we're going to have a roundtable where you, myself, Jeff Cameron, and Corey, and Gene, and the whole crew will be doing some written analysis, but also another video breaking down what we saw at a preseason camp. Because, like you said, there's still 2 weeks till the season opens with that Notre Dame game. But really, for all intents and purposes, the grind of preseason camp is come to an end. Now they'll get into game plan. I mean, there's 2 weeks till that game. It's not game week, but they're considering it like a game week. And so then we'll have continuing coverage going on. But we're going to take some time on Monday to kind of really reflect on these first 2 weeks, what we learned, what were the big surprises, and what are our big question marks going into the game preparation.
It's so nice to have access. It really is to have the context so we can talk knowledgeably about these things. It's the envy of many media beats across the country, what we have here in Tallahassee. And of course, it makes our coverage all the stronger. Remember, folks, Warchant TV is where it's at. If you haven't already hit the like button or the subscribe button, now is the time to do it, because we've got live content every day, from 1 to 3 p.m. The Jeff Cameron Show, Monday and Wednesday through Friday. Seminole Headlines with Ira Schoffel, Corey Clark, and Jeff Cameron on Tuesdays from 1 to 3. And did you check out Trench Talk with Devontae Love-Taylor? The first edition of it was a smashing success. It's a half-an-hour program driven by you, the fans. You can ask Devontae Love-Taylor questions directly. And the new edition of that will be Monday night at 6 p.m. Haslot Hunjavanti will be hosting the proceedings, and Devontae Love-Taylor will be back in tow. So if you haven't already, the time to subscribe is now. And be sure to head to warchant.com right now to check out this article about the freshmen and also the great coverage coming out of the scrimmage as we get into, like you said, Ira, kind of a game plan week, a regular week of install. Once again, for warchant.com's managing editor, Ira Schoffel, I am Tom Lang, the director of original content at warchant.com and Warchant TV. We will see you next time.